Amelia stood in front of the towering glass building of Hawthorne Industries, staring at her faint reflection on the polished doors as if the woman looking back was a stranger she didn't quite recognize anymore. Her hair, once soft and neatly kept, was pulled into a low, hurried bun. Her clothes, though clean, carried the wrinkles of too many restless nights, and her eyes, those dark, exhausted eyes, held stories she wished she could erase. She inhaled deeply, but even the breath trembled through her chest. This wasn't how she imagined coming here, not like this, not with her heart drenched in shame, not with a desperation so heavy she could feel it in her bones. She had always believed that dignity was something she would never lose, no matter how hard life became. Yet here she was, stepping into a world she didn't belong to, because life had cornered her with no mercy. The moment she entered the lobby, the world shifted from the cold December air to the colder, polished hush of corporate authority. Marble floors stretched wide beneath her feet, and the receptionist's desk gleamed like something out of a magazine she used to flip through during easier times. People in pressed suits and confident strides walked past her without noticing her, or worse, some looked directly at her with the faint, lingering judgment of those who could smell struggle from a distance. Amelia tightened her grip on her bag strap. She didn't have the luxury of caring what they thought. Her sister lay in a hospital bed with bills she could no longer pay, and her landlord had given her one last warning before eviction. Jobs she applied to didn't call back. The one she had fired her not because she was incompetent, but because rumors spread faster than truth. Rumors involving a coworker's jealousy, a false accusation, a misunderstanding twisted into something vile. She walked toward the reception desk, her pulse thundering in her ears, and when the receptionist asked her name, her voice cracked despite her effort to sound steady. Even speaking felt like confessing defeat. I have an appointment with Mr. Hawthorne, she said, though it hardly sounded like her. The receptionist nodded, checked the system, then gestured politely for her to take the elevator to the 40th floor. Amelia felt her stomach twist. Elevators always made her nervous, but nothing compared to the fear of facing the man whose name alone carried power, wealth, and reputation big enough to terrify the city's most seasoned businessmen. Ethan Hawthorne, the single-father CEO known for shutting down billion-dollar deals with one cold glance, firing board members without hesitation, and running his empire with the precision of someone who couldn't afford a single mistake. The elevator doors closed around her, trapping her with the soft hum of rising floors, and she clenched her hands together until her nails dug into her palms. She replayed the reasons she was here, each one more painful than the last, and wondered if she would even be allowed to finish a sentence before Ethan dismissed her. The elevator chimed, and when the doors slid open, Amelia stepped into a hallway so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat echoing inside her chest. A long wall of glass revealed the city sprawling beneath them, glittering like a universe she didn't belong to. She approached the heavy oak door marked, Ethan Hawthorne, CEO. Her knees felt weak. She raised her hand to knock, then froze. What if he refused to listen? What if he had already heard the rumor that ruined her life? What if her last chance at saving her sister vanished the moment she opened her mouth? But shutting down wasn't an option, not anymore. She knocked. Silence. Then a faint, deep, "Come in." She pushed the door open, stepping into an office larger than the entire apartment she and her sister shared. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in a wash of golden afternoon light. Strange, she expected the room to feel cold, but instead it felt lonely. Papers were stacked neatly on the desk, a few children's drawings were pinned to a board behind it, simple crayon sketches of a stick-figure family, a small smiling girl holding hands with a tall man. That surprised her. Somehow, she imagined Ethan Hawthorne as the type of man who had no time for softness. But those drawings told a different story. At first, she didn't see him. He stood near the window, his back to her, tall and broad-shouldered, still as a statue carved from quiet storms. His suit was dark, fitted, powerful, yet the way he held himself revealed a weariness she didn't expect. Ethan Hawthorne, the man the world feared, looked like someone carrying burdens heavier than his entire empire. When he finally turned, Amelia felt her breath catch, not from attraction, but from the intensity of his gaze. His eyes were a deep, unreadable shade of brown, sharp enough to slice through pretense, yet softened by something she couldn't name. He studied her quietly, not with judgment, but with curiosity, and something almost like recognition, as though he had seen this type of brokenness before. "You're Amelia Clark," he said, his voice controlled, low, steady. She nodded, her throat too tight to answer. "Sit." It wasn't commanding, it was careful, almost gentle, as though he sensed how fragile she felt. She sat at the edge of the chair, clutching her bag on her lap like a shield. He took the seat across from her but didn't open the file on his desk. Instead, he watched her with an unsettling stillness. "Why are you here?" he asked, not coldly, not impatiently, but directly. She swallowed hard. The words she'd practiced dissolved on her tongue. Shame rose like a wave inside her, threatening to pull her under. She wanted to explain everything, her sister's surgery, the eviction notice, the false accusations, but none of it came out. Instead, tears burned at the corners of her eyes, humiliating her. She looked down, unable to meet his gaze. Ethan noticed. He leaned back, silent, waiting, as if giving her space to breathe. And that unexpected patience cracked something inside her. When she finally lifted her eyes, he wasn't looking at her with suspicion or irritation. He was examining the tremble in her hands, the tension in her shoulders, the quiet pain she couldn't hide. And something in him shifted. He didn't open her resume. He didn't ask about her qualifications. He didn't mention the rumors that had spread about her. Instead, he asked the one question she least expected, one that pierced straight through her defenses, one that made her breath hitch in her throat, because it wasn't the question of a CEO. It was the question of someone who had once been hurt and learned how to recognize the same wounds in others. With a soft, sincere voice, Ethan Hawthorne broke the silence between them and asked, "Who hurt you?" The world seemed to stop. Amelia blinked, stunned, because no one had ever asked her that. Not her former boss, not her neighbors, not even her friends who drifted away when her life began to crumble. For a moment she forgot about the office, the skyscraper, the wealth, the power. For a moment, it felt like Ethan saw straight into the pieces of her she tried to bury. Her mouth parted, but no sound came. She pressed her hands to her knees to keep them from shaking, but Ethan noticed anyway. He didn't push. He didn't rush. He simply waited, calm, steady, patient, something she had never associated with a man of his status. She tried to speak again, but her voice cracked. I didn't know who else to come to," she whispered, and the words sounded pathetic even to her. "Not for money. Not for pity. She trembled. Ethan leaned slightly forward, elbows on his knees, his expression unmoving but gentle. "You're safe here," he said softly, so softly it felt unreal coming from a man who intimidated entire boardrooms. Her chest tightened. Why was he being kind? Why wasn't he tearing apart her story before she even told it? Why wasn't he treating her like another problem to dismiss? She took a shuddering breath, trying again, fighting tears that kept blurring her vision. "My sister, she's sick. I've lost my job. People said things about me that weren't true. And I know I don't deserve your time, but..." "Stop," Ethan said quietly, raising a hand. Not to silence her, but to steady her. Their eyes met, and for the first time, she saw something raw in his gaze, something vulnerable. "You think you're here undeserving," he said, "but you walked in holding more courage than half the people whose resumes land on my desk." She blinked, stunned. Ethan's jaw tightened as if he were remembering something unpleasant. "I know what it looks like when a person walks in carrying shame that doesn't belong to them," he said, and his voice dropped slightly, almost as if speaking from old wounds. "I know what it's like to come here because you have no choice left." Amelia's heart stilled. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected him to understand anything about her life. "Mr. Hawthorne," she whispered. "Ethan," he corrected gently, surprising her again. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Ethan, I didn't come to ask for charity. I came to ask for a chance. One job. One opportunity. I'll take anything. I'll work any hours. I just can't lose my sister." Her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan exhaled slowly, something heavy flickering across his features, like a memory he tried to hide. He leaned back in his seat, studying her again, but this time not with the eyes of a CEO, rather, with the eyes of a father, a man who knew loss, a man who had been forced to carry burdens too early. "My daughter was 3 when her mother left," he said quietly, completely unprompted. Amelia's breath caught. He never talked about his personal life. Not to the media. Not to his employees. Never. People said things about me too, he continued. Things that weren't true. Things that made me feel like I was drowning in rooms full of people. Amelia's eyes widened, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. Pain knew pain. He sighed. So I'll ask again, he said softly. Who hurt you? And that was the moment Amelia broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But gently, like a quiet, crumbling collapse of a woman who had held herself together for too long. Her tears fell one by one, silent and humiliating, but Ethan didn't look away. He didn't shift uncomfortably. He didn't roll his eyes or sigh impatiently. He simply watched her with steady, unwavering empathy, the kind she never expected from the richest, most feared man in the city. The world outside the windows seemed to disappear as she finally answered in a whisper, "Everyone I trusted." Ethan's jaw tightened again. He nodded slowly, as if he understood that more deeply than he ever wanted to admit. Then let's start by rebuilding that, he murmured. Here. With me. Amelia froze, not sure she heard him correctly. Ethan didn't let her speak. He stood, walked around the desk, and gently placed a folder in front of her, one marked confidential employment contract, special assistant. She stared at it, stunned, shaking. Why would you offer me this? She whispered. Ethan met her eyes, and in a voice filled not with power but with sincerity, he answered, because people who walk in broken and still ask for hope are the strongest people I've ever met. For the first time in months, Amelia felt the faintest spark of something she thought she had lost forever, something small and trembling, but real. Hope. And she didn't know it yet, but this moment, this meeting, this question, this man, would alter the course of her life forever.